I had spent most of my life quietly managing, observing, and understanding the people around me. But life has a way of shifting, of placing you in positions where even the most careful observer must step into the light. It was early March in Norwich, the air still sharp from the retreating winter. The streets smelled faintly of wet stone and the dampness of the River Winsome, curling around the old city like a secret. I had recently undergone hip replacement surgery, and the doctor's orders were clear. I needed care, stability, and someone to look after me. Living alone, as much as I had cherished my independence, was no longer an option. Daniel, my only son, had insisted I stay with him. His house, a modest yet elegant townhouse in the city center, was bright and welcoming. Claire, his wife, greeted me with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. There was something carefully calculated about her manner, too precise, too measured. "Of course, Mother, you're always welcome," she said, her tone light, almost cheerful. Yet beneath that veneer, I could feel the tension, a quiet resistance that curled like smoke in the corners of her voice. I smiled back, careful not to betray my instincts. "Thank you, Claire. It's very kind of you." Her eyes flicked toward the guest room door, a silent dismissal I felt in my chest. I had expected minor adjustments, perhaps some impatience as I navigated the house with my walker, but nothing could have prepared me for the true face that would emerge once Daniel left for his 3-day business trip. Before I tell you what followed next, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know where you are watching from in the comment section. The first morning alone with Claire was deceptively calm. The sun streamed through the bay window, painting the room in soft gold, but there was an unnatural chill that seemed to follow her. "Claire, dear, could you bring me a glass of water?" I asked, my voice hesitant. She paused mid-step, turning sharply, her expression a mask of exasperation. "How much longer are you going to be a burden in our lives?" she snapped, the words cutting deeper than any winter frost. My hands shook and I lowered my gaze. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Her smile was contemptuous, cruel. "Oh, don't whine. Daniel needs to focus on me, not some woman taking up space in his life." Every word was a lash across my dignity. I had loved Daniel fiercely, and Claire's venomous carelessness stung like betrayal sharpened to a point. I kept quiet, my mind racing, not with plans for retaliation, but with strategies for survival. By the next day, her cruelty escalated. Without warning, she packed my bag and drove me to a homeless shelter on the outskirts of the city. The streets of Norwich blurred past my window, buildings that had once seemed friendly now looming like silent witnesses to my humiliation. Daniel, of course, was none the wiser. She turned to me before leaving. "Daniel doesn't need to know about this. You don't want to upset him, do you?" I did not answer. My hands trembled, not just from my hip, but from a cold, sinking realization. Claire's true nature had been hidden behind that polite smile, and now it had fully revealed itself. The shelter was a strange, alien place. It smelled of disinfectant, of worn linens, and of desperation. I kept to myself, avoiding the stares and murmurs of those around me, but I called Daniel every day. When he finally returned from his trip, exhaustion and confusion written on his face, he drove straight to the shelter, his hands firm on the wheel as if he could shield me from the world with sheer force of will. That evening, he returned home, pretending ignorance of Claire's actions. She was there, sipping wine, her posture that of a woman who had triumphed. "Oh, hi, how was your trip?" she asked, her voice carefully light. Not bad, Daniel replied, his smile small, almost imperceptible. But where's Mom? Claire shrugged, feigning innocence. She went home a few days ago, said she's feeling better. Daniel's eyes darkened imperceptibly. He reached for a small, carefully wrapped box. Oh, I hope it's the bracelet I wanted, Claire said, lifting the lid eagerly, only to recoil, her scream filling the room. Inside were keychains, each labeled with a date. The dates marked every cruel, inconsiderate, or manipulative action she had taken against me during my stay. You thought you'd like something to remember, Daniel said softly. Every time you try to pretend you're perfect, you'll be reminded of what you did. Claire's face turned ashen. This isn't... How did... Daniel's gaze was steady. I didn't. She did. For the first time, the air in the house shifted. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not in vengeance, but in justice realized without malice. The morning after the gift incident, Norwich woke to a gray drizzle, the kind that seeps into your bones. I stayed in my room, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the occasional clatter of trams on cobblestone streets. For once, I allowed myself a quiet moment of relief. Claire's face, usually a mask of artificial cheer, had betrayed fear, just a hint, fleeting but unmistakable. She tried to act normal, preparing breakfast as if nothing had happened, but the tension in her movements was palpable. Every pour of juice, every careful slice of toast carried the weight of someone walking on cracked ice, expecting it to give way at any moment. "Would you like some tea, Mother?" Daniel asked gently. His voice held that same quiet authority he always carried, the kind that demanded attention without raising itself. "I'd love some, dear," I said, keeping my voice light, though my mind was sharper than ever. Claire's attempt at civility was strained. She placed the teacup in front of me with exaggerated politeness, her eyes darting as if to catch some small mistake I might make. I held the cup, letting the warmth seep into my hands, and watched her carefully. Every twitch, every subtle sigh betrayed her anxiety. It was then I realized something critical. She had never anticipated resistance, not from me, not from Daniel, and certainly not from the silent, steady judgment of reality itself. The more she tried to control, the more fragile her facade became. By mid-morning, she had left for a shopping trip, ostensibly to pick up a few items for the house. I took the opportunity to explore the guest room more thoroughly. Behind a stack of magazines, I found receipts, notes, and subtle reminders of her attempts to manipulate small domestic details. Shopping lists meant to inconvenience, schedules designed to corner, subtle insinuations in Daniel's email drafts. I smiled faintly. She was meticulous, but meticulosity is only useful until someone else learns how to read the patterns. Over the next week, subtle shifts began to occur. Daniel maintained a quiet but watchful presence, asking me gently about my exercises, my meals, my recovery, simple attentions that carried a weight of protective authority. Claire, meanwhile, seemed to grow increasingly restless, her sharp remarks masked as casual comments more frequent. "You really don't need to keep calling Daniel every day, Mother. He's busy," she said one morning, brushing past me in the hallway. Her tone was casual, but the bite in it was unmistakable. I turned slowly, deliberately. "Oh, Claire, I wouldn't want to inconvenience anyone, though I do appreciate your concern." Her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. The silence was a small victory, yet it carried a larger lesson. Power, when wielded too eagerly, attracts scrutiny. By the third day, the ripple effect began outside the house. Claire had a dinner party planned, inviting a few friends from her social circle. She had intended for it to be a display of elegance, sophistication, and subtle dominance. I, of course, did not attend. Instead, I watched quietly from my room as Daniel prepared quietly for his own obligations, careful not to overshadow, but to maintain his steady, calm influence. During the evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was from a mutual acquaintance who had attended the party. "Claire seemed off tonight. Strange things said about you. People noticed." I allowed myself a quiet, private smile. Subtlety works in layers, and the seeds of exposure had begun to sprout. One does not need malice to see justice unfold, only patience, attentiveness, and the courage to remain unshaken. 2 weeks after the shelter incident, Norwich was slowly thawing from winter. The sun caught on the wet streets, glinting off puddles and cobblestone alike. I had been improving steadily, regaining mobility and confidence. Claire's attempts to dominate daily life had grown less frequent, but more desperate. One afternoon, Daniel asked me to accompany him to a local gallery opening. The event was quiet, cultured, and full of people who appreciated subtlety, elegance, and integrity. Claire, of course, expected to attend, to display charm and control, but Daniel declined her invitation without announcing it to her. We arrived, and I felt a quiet thrill as the city moved past us, the gallery doors welcoming us into a space where appearances mattered, but authenticity shone brighter. Claire, hearing about the outing afterward, attempted to mask her annoyance, but Daniel's calm recounting of the evening left her flustered. "You should have seen the way people spoke about the exhibition," he said casually over dinner. "It was enlightening." Her smile faltered. There was no malice in Daniel's voice, only truth. And in the presence of truth, pretension withers. That night, I lay in my guest room, reflecting on the unfolding events. Claire's arrogance had been met with quiet resistance, her cruelty exposed in subtle, irreversible ways. Justice, I realized, did not need theatrics or vengeance. It required patience, observation, and the quiet knowledge that every action has its reflection sooner or later. And as I drifted into sleep, I felt an unfamiliar sense of empowerment, not because I had struck back, but because the natural course of consequence had begun to tilt, ever so slightly, in my favor. Spring had arrived in Norwich, but the city streets were still slick from lingering rains. The air smelled of wet stone and blooming flowers, a strange combination that mirrored my own conflicting emotions. Relief at my recovery, yet anticipation of the storm brewing quietly within the walls of Daniel's house. Claire's behavior had shifted from overt cruelty to a subtler, more insidious form. She no longer shouted or berated. Instead, she manipulated conversations, twisted words, and sought to isolate me subtly, hoping to appear as the gracious hostess while keeping me uneasy. One afternoon, Daniel asked me to join him in reviewing plans for a local charity he was supporting. I had always enjoyed helping him with these projects. It was a chance to exercise my mind and contribute meaningfully. Claire, upon hearing this, attempted to intervene. "You know, Mother, these meetings can be tiring," she said, her tone light but sharp. "Perhaps you should stay home today." I turned slowly, deliberately letting my gaze meet hers. "Oh, Claire, I wouldn't want to tire you with my presence, but Daniel seems to think I have something to contribute, and I trust his judgment." The flicker of frustration that passed across her face was subtle, yet deliciously revealing. She had underestimated both Daniel's patience and my resilience.
Later that evening, I overheard her speaking on the phone, voice hushed but tense. No, he's not noticing yet, but she's recovering too quickly. I don't know how to handle it. Her words, meant to be secret, reached me like whispers in the night. The first layer of her invincibility had begun to peel. Claire's control was slipping, and every small misstep would only accelerate her downfall. The turning point arrived one cloudy Saturday. Daniel had organized a small luncheon at the house, inviting friends and colleagues. Claire had expected it to be her stage, a display of charm and subtle dominance. Instead, it became the arena of revelation. I remained quiet, observing. Claire flitted around, offering polite smiles and small talk, while Daniel moved with calm assurance, greeting guests, and subtly directing the flow of conversation.
As the meal progressed, Claire attempted to recount the story of my time alone at the shelter, spinning it as though I had exaggerated my ordeal. She even suggested that Daniel had overreacted. But before she could fully manipulate the narrative, a guest, one of Daniel's old friends, spoke up. I actually met your mother briefly last week when she helped coordinate some charity events. She's remarkable, really insightful. Hard to believe anyone could mistreat her. Claire's eyes widened, her polite mask cracking. Oh, I didn't. Daniel intervened smoothly, voice calm but firm. Perhaps we should leave that topic, Claire. Let's focus on the present. The room fell into a quiet tension, and I realized that the web of lies Claire had spun was starting to unravel in the open. Every whisper, every overheard remark, every subtle attempt at manipulation was now visible to others. The first wave of social exposure had begun, and Claire's desperation was palpable. By now, Claire's control had completely eroded. Her once perfect facade was fractured, her attempts to dominate replaced by flustered evasions. She tried to regain composure, but Daniel's quiet authority and the subtle yet undeniable truth of my recovery and resilience left her cornered. One evening, Daniel and I sat in the living room, reviewing plans for a community initiative. Claire entered, holding a glass of wine, her voice trembling slightly. I thought perhaps we could talk, just the three of us, she said, though it sounded more like a plea than an invitation. I met her gaze calmly. Of course, Claire, we can talk. She faltered, searching for words, and in that moment I saw the full weight of consequence settle upon her. Every cruel word, every act of manipulation, every attempt at humiliation, everything she had done was reflected back in the quiet, steady dignity of the people around her. Daniel spoke gently yet firmly. Claire, you need to understand that respect is earned, not demanded. Actions have consequences, whether immediate or delayed. Her lips trembled, no reply forthcoming. For the first time, she was confronted with the reality she had tried so hard to control. The final chapter of our story unfolded quietly, almost poetically. Claire eventually left the household, not in shameful spectacle, but in the calm inevitability of her own making. Could not undo the fracture she had caused, nor could she erase the respect that had quietly grown around me through patience, dignity, and resilience. Daniel and I rebuilt our household, slowly and carefully, with subtle routines, laughter, and genuine care. The city of Norwich, with its winding streets and reflective canals, became a backdrop not just for recovery, but for quiet triumphs. I often walked along the river in the early mornings, the mist curling around my feet, thinking of the lessons of the past weeks. Cruelty leaves traces, and malice, no matter how meticulously disguised,
always meets its reflection. I did not celebrate vengeance, I celebrated justice, the kind that requires no harm, only patience, observation, and unwavering moral integrity. And in that reflection, I found not only vindication, but also a deeper understanding of power, resilience, and the subtle, unyielding force of truth. Claire's own actions had written her story. I merely lived mine with grace. As the spring sun glinted off the water, I understood true strength is quiet, and the consequences of injustice are never silent.